Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I have a fascinating and really inspirational young lady to introduce you to tonight, Jessica Meier. She is the founder of an organization called Breaking the Chain, which is a motivational speaking business that she's got, and she's had it for over a decade. And she's got a really interesting story that I think we'll delve into about how she got into that and what her message is. And she's also recently launched a newly licensed real estate business in the Niagara region. She's driven. She's passionate, she's committed, and she's a well-rounded professional. Jessica Meier, welcome to Meier. I apologize. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Brian?
Very well, thank you. So tell me a little bit about how you got into breaking the chain and what is breaking the chain.
Yeah. So Breaking the Chain is I originally was a motivational speaking business. So when I was just a young kid at 19 years old, and I was just coming out of a season of poverty, I was overcome by a lot of generational hindrances with poverty and with some addictions and all kinds of things. And Breaking the Chain was born at the time as a means to motivate people to continue to break free from certain things off their lives that perhaps they had carried down from generation to generation, and just empowering people to make the best of their lives. So when there was kids facing poverty at the time, it was perfect because that was very relatable. I had just walked through there. So it was more of like a really encouraging story to be like, you can do it too, right? You can get out of this cycle of poverty. You can face this season that you're going through. And then from there, it just evolved into whether it was in the corporate field or otherwise, we all carry chains in our lives. We all carry experiences that can be heavy. And Breaking the Chain was a really cool message to help encourage people to just use that as an element of strength rather than an element of weakness, and to share their story to encourage others to break free.
And so what did you say? Like, did you have lessons that you provided that allowed people to break the chain, or like, what did you say?
Yeah, so it would depend on the situation. So I was hired sometimes to raise money for poverty. So I was at one point in 2012, I helped raise $3.1 million for the community for food banks and shelters. So my message was primarily based on motivating people to break the cycle of poverty and to donate. So I was focused on speaking to donors. And then
And this was
if I
in
was
Niagara or whereabouts?
at the Niagara United Way. Yep. So, and then if it was like, let's say a one-on-one meeting and it was somebody facing addictions, then I would face my talk or my coaching around what keys they could use in order to break free from that, whether it was leaning on community or finding a mentor or somebody else that had walked through it. So just really relating my personal experiences at the time to help it varied across multiple audiences. So it really depended on who I spoke to. But what was cool about it was that it was always relatable. There was always people that were facing some kind of setback or some kind of burden that they wanted to be free of.
So I find that often people like yourself that are speaking about things like this really resonate with people if they share their own personal story,
Yes.
because that's how people sort of say, you know, this person is authentic. I can understand that they actually went through it, and
Yeah.
you know, there's often similarities in people's stories, and even if there aren't similarities, you can at least sort of get empathetic for the individual based on the story that they've told. Did you
Yes.
did you open up and share with people your own personal story?
Yeah. Again, it would depend on who I was speaking to, which would highlight certain areas. I find like my life experience has been very, um, what's the word for it? I guess very well-rounded. And so, yeah, it would depend. But yeah, most of the time, yes, I would open up and be vulnerable, which I think is the hardest part about motivational speaking. It's being a professional, but also having the vulnerable part of being like, I'm not perfect. There's a balance there that some people can struggle with, and I did for some time, but most of my most engaging talks were very vulnerable about my experiences because, yeah, it was relatable at that point.
Sounds like an interesting business, and you actually made a business of this.
I did, yeah. So it was whether I was doing it for free just to help donors donate and raise money for what I was passionate about. But there were times where I would be paid to come and speak in front of a slew of different audiences. So it has taken a back seat since I opened up Breaking the Chain Realty, but it's something I'm still very passionate about.
Well, let's take a break for some messages and come back and delve a little bit more into in both your speaking as well as the real estate business. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Jessica Meier. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting with Jessica Meier tonight. She's really quite an inspirational young lady who's launched a real estate business recently, but for the last couple of years, she's been running a speaking business, a keynote speaking business about called Breaking the Chain, which is about really escaping poverty, escaping addiction, and other things that might be holding people back. And Jessica, you said that you on stage were vulnerable and opened up. And I'm a firm believer that everyone has this sort of personal story or signature story that sort of explains who they are and what they've become. And often it is a bad story, a negative story, but it's a story of overcoming that challenge. And that's what motivates people and grabs people and makes them want to listen to you and your authentic story. And you said you'd be willing to share some of that story with us. What got you into this situation of poverty and addiction? Can you share that with us? Do you mind?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. So I grew up in a family that was, I think everybody really did their best. Now that I'm a mother and I'm older, I know that everybody tried their best, but unfortunately, there were circumstances that brought me to a point even in my own household where I felt like I couldn't ask for food. I was hungry and I would succumb to eating cat food or other things that would allow me to survive. And again, not my parents were unaware at the time. And it affected my schoolwork. It affected the relationships that I chose to have in my life. And as a result of that, as a consequence of all of that, I ended up deciding to leave home at a very young age. I was put in a youth detention center for stealing food and breaking my probation at the time. And I was only 14. And then when I was in jail, I realized that there was some things missing that I perhaps wasn't getting at home, that I was getting in the juvenile detention system, and that was just some counseling, an ability to talk to people that perhaps cared differently about me and had a different perspective. And as a result of that, I made a hard choice at 14 to leave home. And with very few skills, and we think we know everything at that age, but I ended up going through 3 or 4 years of actually only 3 years, yeah, 3 years of poverty in youth homes and homeless shelters. And again, this is purely my choice. I probably would have been allowed home if I would have asked, but I chose a hard path, and I ended up falling into some addictions. I ended up falling into some bad relationships, and the one relationship at the time, he too struggled with some things and some heavy drugs. And I found myself at a position at 17 pregnant and with this gentleman, and I made another hard choice and said, I'm not gonna partake in this lifestyle. I obviously I'm making a different choice. I'm making a choice to have this baby and to be healthy and as healthy as possible. And I left his home at 2:30 in the morning with a bag and my shoes, and because I had caught him under the influence, and so I left, and I didn't know where I was going, and I found myself going through multiple apartments and having my daughter at 18. But a beautiful thing happened. I went through because I was going through adoption centers, and I looked at the root of abortion, and I'm really happy today, obviously, that I didn't go through that. But I went through all my options, and through the course of events, I found a family that needed a little girl. They wanted a little girl for 11 years, and they couldn't have any more children after leukemia, bone marrow transplant years prior to this. And so they ended up adopting my daughter at 8 weeks old, and subsequently I became a part of their family. and my life completely changed. I ended up feeling a part of something much larger than what I had been carrying with me for years prior to that, and I ended up raising all kinds of money for those same industries that helped me. So whether it was community care or housing help or any of these other organizations in the Niagara region that helped me survive poverty at the time. And then it evolved into just understanding my story and understanding why did I do the things that I did, and how how could I make myself a better person, and how could I help people come out of this perspective that poverty was the only way. Because it was dark and it was scary and it was challenging. And even for my daughter, it was a big motivation for me to break the chain of cycle of poverty and addiction that ran in my family. And I wanted to choose a different path for her. So the adoption, not only the adoption, but the new mindset allowed me to become a really well rounded individual and professional. And still to this day, I believe it is a major contributor to my drive and passion in helping others reach their full potential. So I hope that helps give
So
you a.
it does, and it's really quite a compelling story. Let me ask you a couple questions if I could. You're extremely articulate. You went to school the whole time through
I did.
this situation.
I
Uh,
did. I worked two jobs and went to seven high schools and or six high schools, and I also had yeah, I had multiple things going on. Yeah.
and you said that your parents didn't know you were eating cat food. Like, why were they addicted? Were they just not good parents? Like, what's the story there?
I no, I you know what? It was just poor communication, I think, in our household. I My mom had two more kids with my stepfather, and they were busy with that, and I didn't really, I felt like if I even asked for a cookie or something, I felt like I would get in trouble. So I decided to do that instead. It was more or less like an avoidance thing for me. It was a choice that I made, and it was something that they were unaware. If I would have asked them for the food, they probably would have given me some. So it wasn't like a neglect. It was more or less just an unknowing, which can happen, can be just as dangerous.
So what motivated you to run away?
Yeah, it was just honestly, it was just that moment in that youth detention center where I felt safe. I felt heard. I felt safe. I felt like I wasn't a bad person. And that feeling that it gave me when other people were crying to go home to their families, I was like, no, I want to stay. I want to stay here because I was being nurtured in a different way that I perhaps didn't feel before. And that made me have the decision of saying, you know what, I'm gonna just try to do this on my own.
And what got you into the youth detention center? Why were you there?
I was there because I had stolen food and candy at the time, obviously, because I was just a kid. But then I was late coming home from school, and so a breach of probation brought me there.
So you were in probation because of the theft, and then because you were late, you broke probation and you got sent to the juvenile detention center.
I was only supposed to be there for 3 days. I stayed for a month and a half. And then they said, "You're a good kid. You got to go. Like you can't keep staying here." And that's when I decided that I was going to go into a youth home at the time in Welland. Hmm.
So that's a positive story about what happened at the detention center. I haven't heard many positive stories about detention centers. What was it? Was it an individual? Was it what was the positive experience at the juvenile detention center?
Yeah, I think it was just being understanding that the circumstances that I was in, I think naturally it kind of evolved into my motivational speaking because I had such a gift for sharing my story and my experiences, and I had such an awareness of the things that I was going through that it was easy for me to just explain where I was at, how I got there, and the people that I was surrounded with were clearly they were like counselors. They were professionals that were built for this kind of stuff, and the words that they used, the love that they expressed, allowed me to believe that I was meant for more. I was better than I thought I was, And I was strong enough then that I gave myself credit for. So it just gave me the courage to be able to make a bold decision.
And then it sounds like the next stage was addiction. Tell me how you got involved in addiction.
Yeah,
Was
so
it drugs? Was it alcohol? What was it?
yeah, I know it was definitely a little bit of both. I think so I was 16 at the time. And when you're surrounded by these kids that are going through the youth system, unfortunately, like you've probably heard, which is most of the negative stories, is that there's typically a road that you go down just because you're surrounded by people that are going through a lot of struggles, a lot of hurt, and a lot of pain. So they tend to try to numb it out with these substances. And so I was no different. I had not been exposed to these sort of things prior to being on the street, but by being around these certain people, they had introduced these things into my life, and as a result, it did have a grip on me for quite some time until I found out that I was pregnant.
And so, how did you get out of it? Was it the pregnancy? Was it a rehab? You know, you just did decide because you were pregnant you were going to be healthy? Like what was a catalyst for cleaning up?
Yeah, so it was mostly because of the what I had witnessed around me was there was a lot of chaos. And as I went in and out of sobriety, because it wasn't like I did it every day. I witnessed people that had struggled and gone down certain roads. And I had an intuition about me that that's not what I wanted for my life. And the pregnancy gave me the motivation that I needed in order to stay on a certain track. But what really changed it, to be honest, because I still struggled, was the love of the family that my daughter found herself into. I think that really helped because it gave me a sense of peace and security that I needed in order to go deeper into the wounds that I was holding on to that inevitably led to those behaviors in the first place. And that's really what broke that stuff off of my life.
So during the pregnancy, you were still addicted.
No, not during the pregnancy. I mean, while I was in the beginning stages of my pregnancy when I didn't know, there was some, but I struggled. Struggled with temptation for even a couple years after my pregnancy, where there was, these things are around, right? Especially with alcohol being accessible. So when I wasn't pregnant anymore, there was temptation all the time. And at 19 years old and the bars are now open up and you're experiencing all of these new things and quite sloppily. You have there is a chance that you could open back up those doors and go down that path. So you need stability and you need certain things in your life to actually want to live for in a healthy manner. And I think the family made it very clear, like that was not going to be part of my life. And if it was, my relationship with my daughter would be off the table. So it was more of an ultimatum. I had to make a choice every day. Okay, what is the right thing to do here? And we all have that choice, right? Whether or not we have motivation or not, we all have a choice to make good or bad choices, right? So, um, yeah, it
Now,
helped.
now let's roll back. You were 17. You were
Mhm.
pregnant.
Yeah.
You were. It sounds like you were living with a guy. Was he an older man?
Yes, he was. Yep. He
And
was
he,
3 years older than me. Yeah.
I beg pardon?
3 years older. Yep.
Oh, so not that much older.
Mhm.
But older. And he was also into drugs.
He was the one that was into drugs more than he was the one that introduced me to stuff. Yeah.
But you were living with him, and he got you pregnant.
Hmm.
And at 17, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you decided to leave. That
Yep.
must have taken guts.
Yeah, no kidding. It brings me to tears thinking about it because it wasn't even just the decision. It was the the forefront decision of saying, if I catch you one more time doing this, I'm leaving. And knowing that if I didn't, this was going to be a cycle for the rest of my life. I had to be firm and I had to make my word was everything at that point. And it was like from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. pacing in front of that window at 6 months pregnant, okay, at the time, pacing in front of that window, waiting to find out when he was coming home. As soon as the car pulled in, I remember the headlights and then running downstairs and pretending I'm sleeping. And it felt like hours before this man fell asleep, but I could feel him shaking and like I knew that he was on something. And as soon as he fell asleep, it was like that moment of saying, okay, now is my time. Like I have to escape. And he didn't know where I went. I left. I didn't tell him. I just 6 months pregnant. I'm walking, not knowing where I'm going in the middle of winter time. And I walked to work for the next morning, and thank the Lord, there was somebody right beside me that had a room for rent at their house. And that's how I found a place to live quite quickly. So I was lucky in that respect. But yeah, it was that 10 to 2 a.m. of that thought process of, should I be doing this? What am I going to do? And that fear that ran through my head for those 4 hours, that was the hard part. Yeah.
Did he
But
come, did he come after you?
he did, yeah, he did. And I ended up putting a restraining order against him, and he went to jail. Yeah, so it led to a whole bunch. It wasn't just one choice or another. It was multiple hard choices to make during that time. But yeah, your word is everything. I think and that's one thing I learned in that experience, that you have to stand by your word when you make a decision.
And you stuck by it.
I did.
You
I
didn't
did.
waver.
Nope, did not.
And then the decision to not abort, to have your daughter, and then to put her up for adoption, that must have been a very difficult decision.
It was also it was a very hard decision. I actually reneged on my decision when I had her. So I gave birth, and then I said, I can't, like, I just love her too much. Right. And I'm sure every parent listening to this understands like how difficult that is. Right. I loved the family that was a potential for her, but that little girl was everything to me. And it took me 8 to 9 weeks to really come to the conclusion that it was the right thing for her. I was still working two jobs. I was still in school. It was not the right environment for her. And she deserved a mother and a father that could love her. And yeah, it was very, very difficult, but one of the most beautiful decisions I made. Yeah.
To have a relationship with the parents that your daughter was adopted by, and a continued relationship with the family is very unusual. How did that all happen?
Yeah, so the mother was my second cousin. And so my grandmother is the one that told me about her wanting another child. And so it was really natural when we met. We were family pretty much. Like we didn't really know each other, but we bonded on that level as family. And so that's how it originally happened. It was just a natural course of events of honesty and transparency and love. And we really all just wanted the best for my daughter. And it was a win-win situation. So, and the relationship afterwards continued flawlessly. Unfortunately, they both have now passed. They passed 10 years later, 10 and 11 years later. So it was pretty awful to have to go through this. Like you're on your roller coaster of life. You're on, you feel like you figured it all out, and then they die. And it's like, life just continues to give you these curveballs that you have to navigate through. And but yeah, the relationship, I was very blessed to have them for the 10 and 11 years that I did.
And so they passed when your daughter was what, 11, 12 years old? What happened then?
11, yeah. So 10 and 11. So the mother had a relapse of cancer, and she passed 3 years later of that. And so that was more expected. We had always known that that could happen after the leukemia transplant that she had had. But the father, so we were all as a family paintballing on a paintball field, and we went through 4 rounds, and he died of a heart attack. And so Chrissy and I were both there, and their two sons were there. So that was a very different kind of loss, because we never expected that to happen, and it was a year after Shelley had passed. So it was, yeah, to navigate that, especially with Chrissy being at such a young age, it was not what anybody would have wanted. Yeah.
So what happened? What happened to Chrissy? What happened to the two boys?
Yeah, so the two boys, they were in their young 20s and they had made the choice. I think that at the time, obviously we were all hurting because we all lost somebody, but they wanted to keep Chrissy at the house. And so the boys decided to move in, and the 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 reality was is that I was prepared to have her full time. I wanted her. I was now married or engaged to my husband, and and as we were going through these conversations, I ended up being pregnant with my son, and so we were starting our own family together, and it would have been really great to have my daughter with us, but the boys really wanted to take that on. So I ended up supporting them through that, as best as I could. And the three of us just we've always as a team been there for Chrissy. So still the challenges keep rolling in, but you know what? I think life prepares you along the way to handle them a little bit better each time.
So where's Chrissy today?
So she's dating. So she has her boyfriend. She's 18 now. So I mean the reality she's almost 19 years old. So she's on her own path. So she's dating, she's in college, and she stays here as much as she wants to.
And still has a relationship with her two brothers.
Yes. Yeah, they do. Hmm.
So it sounds like your second cousin and her husband were really critical in turning your life around.
They were. Absolutely, they were. Yep.
And part of it was just an ultimatum that you had to get clean if you wanted to see your daughter.
Well, I had to stay clean. Yeah, I knew that that was never an option. I couldn't fall backwards. There was too much to lose at that point to fall backwards and do anything to ruin that.
Did they do anything else? Like with, ultimatums are helpful, but what else?
Love. I honestly, I really do believe that it comes down to having somebody believe in you, whether it's the community at the time to help you through poverty, or the counselors at the youth detention center, or the mother that's not your mother, but treats you like their child, that says, I love you and I believe in you, makes the world a difference.
What was your second cousin's name?
Shelley.
Did Shelley love you?
Shelley loved me, yeah.
Like a mother?
Hmm.
She
Yes.
she didn't even know you, you said. How did she come to love you? Why did she come to love you?
Just, I think there's well, we all loved each other. I mean, we spent countless hours and hours and hours talking and being close to one another. And I think for the benefit of my daughter at the time, that's what you have to do. You have to make it all work. And it just naturally evolved into a very loving relationship on all accounts, right? Yeah. So yeah, she's terribly missed every day.
I've heard lots of stories where there's jealousy between a adopted mother versus the biological mother, and so for her to welcome you into the family and love you and help you through your challenges, when really what she wants is your daughter to love her as her mother, that must have been incredibly generous and wonderful and loving of her.
Yeah, it was. And I think the reality is like it has to be, I think with any adoption journey, it's easy to allow any kind of fear or bitterness come in, but as long as both sides, and not just her side, but for me, it was more or less like I knew the decision that I made. Again, my word is everything. So when I say that these are her parents, I am now taking a step back out of respect for the position that I've put them in to support that. And no matter what thoughts come in or temptations to take over any ounce of control or anything, you loosen your grip out of respect for the choice that you made, right? And that's how it worked. We both respected each other and loved each other in whatever role we were allowed to have.
Shelley seems like a wonderful person.
Amazing. Yeah, the world, if anything, if I can be like, I mean, I do believe I'm a lot like her now. But if the world could have, 50% of the people like that, it'd be radically changed.
What made her so wonderful? Was it her upbringing? Was it just who she was? What like
I
was it
honestly,
support from
I,
her husband? Like what made her this incredible, loving person that was so giving to you and to Chrissy and to her
Yes.
sons, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, I think to anybody, anybody that she came across, I think for her too, like she was the person of her word, and she also endured some stuff as a child, right? So she also dealt with an alcoholic father and other things. And I think with this is like with any kind of trauma or any kind of life experience that can either tear you down or build you up. When you make certain choices and when you choose the right path every time, it builds something different in you. It builds this type of empathy and a type of strength and a type of just a wholesome person that perhaps you don't get there until you're much, much older because those life experiences haven't hit you yet. But when you're succumbed to a lot of that at a younger age and you choose wisely, um, it allows you to love differently. It allows you to be a different person. And I truly I don't regret anything that I've gone through because of that, because I see things differently, and I'm cautious about my words and my actions because I know that it's never just a one layered problem. There's multiple layers to a problem. And everybody deserves patience and respect and dignity, right? So she was just like that.
Chrissy has gone through a lot. She was adopted. Several years later, she lost her adopted mother. Then she lost her adopted father. Then she was raised by two brothers. And through this whole time period, she had her biological mother, you, in her life. How she turned out?
I think I like with anybody, I think she's still having to navigate some choices, right? Particularly around relationships, right? I think there's especially when it comes to men, I think for young girls, it's very difficult without the right guidance and support to be able to feed through like who is the right person for me, right? I think we all have to figure that out, but I think there's some choices that she's still navigating and through those relationships, but she too she has a conscience that I have no doubt in my mind that she will get through it. She knows when she's doing the right and the wrong thing, and when she does the wrong thing, it she feels it. So that's all you really need at the beginning to really like steer you and good guidance, obviously, good guidance and support. But in terms of everything that she's dealt with, the hurt and the pain and all of that stuff, she still has an immense amount of support around her to get her through life. So she's going to be just fine.
In your comments about breaking the chains earlier, you said that you had to break intergenerational chains. Some people believe that intergenerational trauma, addiction, abuse, violence, whatever that thing is, that it happens for some reason through our genes, through our socialization, through our generations. How do you break that?
Yeah, so it takes somebody to be strong enough and brave enough to break them. I mean, obviously every circumstance is different. I don't want to say that it's possible every single time. I don't know. I believe it is, but I don't know if it is. All that I know is that the cards were stacked pretty tough against me for most of my life. And I I believe that if you have the right integrity, the right support, and the right vulnerability and empathy, um, and you're not too prideful to ask for help, I think that's the main thing that holds a lot of people back. It's like you don't want, as soon as we put all of our cards on the table, we take ours back really quickly because everybody's got stuff, right? Everybody's got a hard story, but it's those people that are willing to share and dive deep into those pains, whether or not they're their fault or not. You see if the perfect picture is like you see two kids, right? They're raised by, let's say, an alcoholic father, right? And they see them drinking every day, every day, every day. And one child will say, I am not going to drink because my dad did. And another child will say, I'm going to drink because, well, my dad did. Two of the same experience, but two very different perspectives. One will have a harder time breaking that, right? The other one has already broken it by having that mindset of saying, that's not what I want. That's not what I want for my kids. That's not what I want for myself, right? And many people are faced with that choice, but that choice is so subconscious that, and there's multiple small choices along the way that, and the gravity of them are so important that I don't think people realize. But yeah, so I mean, it's all about that perspective switch. And as long as we can be vulnerable and open about our circumstances and our stories and what we're actually dealing with, not with what's on the surface, but what's really deep inside, I believe any chains can be broken.
Any
And
chains can be broken.
I believe any chains can be broken and new families can begin. I mean, the reality is like by giving my daughter up for adoption, that in a sense was breaking a chain because my grandmother had my mother really young. My mother had her daughter very young. I had my daughter very young, and I said, enough. I want her to have a different life, a good life, a different start. Granted, it didn't turn out 100% the way anybody would have wanted, but I made a choice to break that cycle of thinking about outside of the box, not just for myself, about generations to come.
So if your daughter came to you tonight and said, I want to move in with this guy and get pregnant at 18, what would you tell her?
Good question. I would obviously, I don't think that would happen because I've been very, we've all been very forthcoming with the struggles that we all had to go through. But if it had to happen, it had to happen. I would just have to support her whatever way that I could at that point to make sure that that I was there for my grandbaby as much as possible and that I would make the best out of the lemons that I've been given. I don't know. I really highly doubt that that's going to happen though. It hasn't happened yet and she's almost 19. So technically the cycle's been broken. So
You
I
say it
don't know.
started with your grandmother.
Yes.
Was there addiction? Were there issues with your grandmother, or is it just at the time early
I think
pregnancy?
Yeah, I think at the time, I think things were different, right? I think early pregnancy was
More
a,
normal?
a bit more normal for my grandmother. For my mother, I don't think it was. I think for my mother, it was more, I think they tried to like kind of segregate it or hide it from society at the time. So I don't think it was as normalized for a young person to have a child at 17, 18 years old. Um, when my mother, but circumstances happened and, you know, but yeah, so there was multiple generational things that had happened.
Was your mother in a similar situation of addiction and poverty?
No, I think poverty had plagued our family for a long time. Poverty in a sense where it wasn't like homelessness, but poverty in a sense where there was getting from my side of the family, getting a home or getting, I think I was the first to graduate from a post-secondary education. I was the first to buy my own home, without the help of a man, right? So I think there was certain things that that definitely contributed to these cycles continuing, right? Um, but all I could do was change the circumstances as that I was in.
Jessica, this is an incredible story. Thank you for sharing it with us. And congratulations on breaking the chain and breaking the intergenerational, whatever it was, that was going on. And, I think that everyone that's listening tonight is cheering you on and cheering Chrissy on. And all of us wish we could meet your second cousin because she sounds like she was really critical in turning your life around. And for someone to go through leukemia and be as generous as she was to you and to your daughter and to the balance of her family and to you to welcome you into her family and love you and motivate you to change. That must have been an amazing individual and critically important to you. So thank you for sharing the story. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back, and we're going to talk about where you are today
Yes.
and the future. Stay with us, everyone. What a story. Stay with us. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We're having really quite an amazing conversation with Jessica Meier today. Meier or Meier?
Meier. Yep.
Meier, I apologize.
Mhm.
The about her life, about how she broke the chains. She was a speaker. Breaking the Chain was the name of her coaching business that she went under in her speaking business, and she tried to motivate people to break the chain of whatever they were in: addiction, poverty, um, early pregnancy, I guess, etc. And it's quite the story that you've shared with us, Jessica. Thank you for doing that. Where are you today? You've launched a real estate business, I understand.
Yeah, so I went into 10 years of motivational speaking, and during that time, I was on my way into a high level career. Um, so I ended up becoming a district sales manager for a construction and industrial supplier out in the Toronto area. I lived in the GTA probably for 5 years, did the job, and then once my family stuff had happened, I moved back to Niagara, got engaged, and am now married. And
Congratulations.
yeah, and it's funny. We always have these ideas of like, life is going in a certain direction and we have our eyes set on something. And I loved my job. I loved the career that I was in. I mean, it was a heavy commute from Niagara. It was, about 12 hours of driving a day. I had two young kids under the age of 5, right? And they paid me well, they were compensated well, but it was tough. And when I went off on my second mat leave, a friend of mine mentioned, hey, like, you should really think about getting your real estate license. And I'm like, "Pfft, like no interest. Absolutely not. I actually really felt like real estate was like used car dealership vibes. I really didn't like the thought of becoming an agent. But my husband and I are selling our home and moving. We have a family farm, the Meier Organic Farm, and here in Niagara, and 280 acres, and we wanted to build a home on that property. So I thought, you know what? Why not educate myself on, plans, permits, how the city's involved, how does the sale look, where, and then save money on inevitably selling my house one day. So that was the original intent. So when I went back to work, again, fully committed to staying there because I had been doing it for 7 years. Uh, it radically changed. Something had radically changed, and without knowing, my career was now coming to an end in Toronto. And so I was like, well, I guess I got to try this. I guess I got to try real estate. And I had enjoyed the education process, but I had even more so enjoyed um, the types of people I was starting to meet and learn from. And so I haven't looked back. So it's been so I got registered in May, and I started trading in July, and I've now since closed 8 deals and have 3 listings on the go, 2 more coming up, and 3 buyers under contract. So I've been very busy. I've been extremely busy, and I think a lot of that is attributed to the fact that I was in sales for a very long time. But my goal eventually is to be in commercial real estate because that's what my background is in. So really excited, really excited. So I opened up Breaking the Chain Realty Inc. In September, and yeah, it's been a whirlwind of fun.
And what area do you specialize in?
So primarily in Welland, well, I live in Welland, so I focus on the Welland area and surrounding areas. So Niagara Lake, St. Catharines, I'll go as far as Grimsby, Stony Creek, Hamilton, Dunnville, Port Colborne, Fort Erie, and all this, and Waynfleet, all the surrounding areas. So really the Niagara region.
Right. And how's the market in the Niagara region?
Yeah, it's been great. There's still an abundance of inventory, so prices are staying stable, but the motivations are high right now. So lots of buyers, if buyers are even considering getting into the market, right now is a perfect time because prices are very negotiable. So you can get really good deals. It's not quite a seller's market at this point, but I've had listings go as fast as 2 weeks and then and as slow as 2 months. So I haven't had things sit around very long in the Niagara
I've heard
region.
that, lots of people thought about leaving the GTA during the pandemic and moving to Niagara or Brantford or areas farther out of Toronto, but that with demands to come back to work, people are moving back into the city, and I would have thought that would have sort of lessened demand in Niagara. You don't think that's happened?
No, I was one of them, right? So I sold my condo in Toronto and moved back with the intent of commuting to work. And it was the best decision I ever made. One, because I made good money on my property in Toronto, and you can buy quite lucratively with that money in the Niagara region still. It is pushing out a little bit because Stony Creek and Grimsby, with the commuter, really along the highway there on QEW, even St. Catharines, prices are on the higher end. Niagara Lake's always been high, but it's because the area there is quite beautiful. However, but as soon as you get into like Welland, Port Colborne, Waynfleet, and those areas, you're finding you can buy quite a bit of property for the money that you can get for your property in Toronto. So, no, I think the demand is quite high. I think Toronto is becoming way too overpopulated, and I think the higher you go in your career and the longer you do it, then you want to slow down. And as soon as people want to slow down, they want to get quiet and they want land. This is the way to go.
The two areas that I've been told by lots of people, you didn't mention Port Dover and Crystal Beach. Tell me why you didn't talk about either of those.
I haven't done any business out there. I mean, I do have 3 waterfront properties right now, but closer to the Dunnville, like so along Lake Erie, but closer to Dunnville. So I haven't done Crystal Beach and Port Dover yet. But it's on that list. I don't know the market that well out there yet because I haven't had to navigate that.
If people want to reach out to you from a real estate standpoint, what's the easiest way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you could send me. So obviously, phone is the best. I'm always on my phone. So my phone number is 289-331-9690. And then obviously by email, you can email me at jessicameier@breakingthechain.net.
And you have a website,
Yes, so breakingthechain.net is the website that you can
breakingthechain.net.
yeah, that you can
Fantastic.
yeah.
Jessica, we've had a really interesting conversation today. And breaking the chain obviously is the key to it all. But one of the other keys is love.
Mhm.
And Valentine's Day is this week. How do you think about love?
Yeah, I think love is, there's risk obviously in love. But risk and love are both so essential in life. So if I had to say anything about love, it's like take the risk. Take the risk to love really well. Love the people in your life, love yourself. I think for a long time as a heavily driven career woman, I struggled with taking care of my own body and my own health for the sake of taking care of my career or just wanting just so much more out of life, which there's power in that too. But loving yourself and loving the other people well in your life, there's even though you might lose them one day or they might hurt you, it's still worth taking the risk and loving properly and loving well. You'll never regret that.
You got a couple of interesting examples with your parents where it sounds like they didn't neglect you, but you sort of avoided confronting them. Um, your daughter, who you loved, but you were willing to give up because you loved her so much and you wanted a better future for her. Your second cousin, who invited you in to be part of her family,
Yep.
and was incredibly generous to you. A guy that sounds like you loved, but you hated, and so you left. So that there's love hate, and I guess your daughter's brothers that loved her so much that they wanted to keep that family unit together and support her, even though it was an adopted sister, and I and and then you that loved yourself enough to give yourself a second or third chance,
Mhm.
and make some very important changes.
Yes.
This has
Yep.
been a really wonderful conversation and completely appropriate for Valentine's to talk about the struggles that you've gone through and the love that you've had and the love that you've had that you've given people freedom,
Mm.
given them away, but then also, and I think your second cousin's love for you and Chrissy is amazing. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing.
No problem. Thank you.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining. There's a story here, a really good story about breaking the chain, about so many people that are born into or experience addiction and poverty, abuse, whatever the challenges are, but that have it's interesting, the support from the juvenile detention counselor, the fortitude to leave at 2 o'clock in the morning from a bad situation, the love from an individual that welcomes you into their life, um, and the love for someone where that they can do something better, and therefore you're giving them the freedom to do something different. Giving a child up for adoption, because that that's not the right life for them, and then they could have a better life, must be an incredibly difficult decision, but so filled with love, and desire to break the chain.
Yes.
And then coming from poverty and addiction and teenage pregnancy and ending up being a successful business person with a family
Mm-hmm.
is love for yourself. Well, my gosh, what a great story. Very
Hmm.
inspirational. Jessica, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Good night,
Yeah.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for joining us, and I hope you get inspired by this conversation tonight to love yourself and love other people in your family, in your life. Good night, everybody.
Good night.